The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the crumpled figure lying beside the wagon trail, and Warren Gallagher would have ridden right past if his horse had not suddenly stopped and refused to go another step forward. Warren dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the dusty ground with a soft thud as he approached what he initially thought might be a discarded bundle of clothing. His heart seized when he saw the pale hand stretched out from beneath the faded calico dress, fingers curled slightly as if reaching for something just beyond grasp. He dropped to his knees beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her throat, relieved to feel the faint flutter of a pulse beneath skin that felt paper-thin and burning hot. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, gravelly from days of silence on the trail. The woman's eyelids fluttered but did not open. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her face gaunt with hunger and exposure. Warren looked around quickly, scanning the empty landscape for any sign of a wagon or traveling party, but there was nothing except sagebrush and distant mountains shimmering in the August heat. He had been riding from Cheyenne toward Laramie, Wyoming, carrying dispatches for the territorial marshal, and he had not passed another soul in 2 days. Warren ran back to his horse and grabbed his canteen, returning to kneel beside the woman. He lifted her head gently, cradling it against his knee, and brought the canteen to her lips. Water dribbled down her chin at first, but then her throat worked convulsively and she swallowed. Her eyes opened then, wide and disoriented, the color of storm clouds over the prairie. She stared up at him without comprehension, her gaze unfocused. "Easy now," Warren said softly. "You are safe. I have got you." She tried to speak but only managed a rasping sound. Warren gave her another small sip of water, knowing too much at once could make her sick. He studied her face, trying to guess her age. Young, he thought, maybe early 20s, though suffering had carved lines around her eyes that did not belong there. "When did you last eat?" he asked, though he doubted she could answer. The woman's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her temples into her matted brown hair. She shook her head weakly. Warren cursed under his breath. He had been rationing his own supplies, planning to reach Laramie by nightfall, and his saddlebags contained precious little. But he could not leave her here, and he could not let her starve. He settled her head gently back on the ground and went to his horse again, digging through his supplies until he found the small cloth-wrapped bundle that contained his last meal, a hard biscuit and a strip of dried beef. The beef was too tough for someone in her condition, but the biscuit had been made by the wife of the boarding-house keeper in Cheyenne, and though it was plain and simple, it had been baked with care. Warren had been saving it for his own supper, but looking at the woman lying helpless in the dirt, he knew what he had to do. He broke the biscuit in half and returned to her side, lifting her head again. "Here," he said. "I need you to try to eat this. Just small bites, understand? Let it soften in your mouth first." He pressed a piece of the biscuit between her lips and watched as she struggled to chew. Her eyes closed in what looked like relief or perhaps gratitude. Warren felt something shift in his chest as he watched her eat, something he could not quite name. He had helped people before in his 32 years of life, had pulled men from rivers and shared campfires with strangers, but something about this moment felt different, significant in a way he did not understand. "What is your name?" he asked gently as she finished the first piece. "Rose," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Rose Anderson." "Well, Miss Anderson, I am Warren Gallagher. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Rose's face crumpled and fresh tears came. "Wagon train," she managed. "Cholera, they left me." Warren's jaw tightened. He had heard of such things happening, terrified travelers abandoning the sick rather than risk infection spreading through the entire company. It was a brutal calculation, one he understood even as it made his blood boil. How long ago? 3 days, maybe 4. I lost track. 4 days without food or shelter, probably with barely any water. Warren marveled that she was alive at all. He gave her the second half of the biscuit and watched as she ate it more slowly, with slightly more strength. Color was beginning to return to her cheeks, though she still looked like a strong wind could blow her away. "We need to get you to Laramie," Warren said. "There is a doctor there and you need proper care. Do you think you can ride?" Rose looked at him with something like fear. "I have no money." "Nothing. They took my trunk when they left me." "I am not asking for money," Warren said firmly. "I am asking if you can sit a horse if I hold you." She nodded slowly, and Warren slipped his arms beneath her, lifting her as carefully as he would carry a child. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel every bone in her body through the thin fabric of her dress. He settled her on his horse first, then swung up behind her, wrapping one arm securely around her waist to hold her steady against his chest. Rose sagged back against him, her head falling to rest against his shoulder. "Thank you," she breathed. "I thought I was going to die out there." "Not today," Warren said quietly. He touched his heels to the horse's flanks and they started forward at an easy walk. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The ride to Laramie took 3 hours, and Warren spent most of that time acutely aware of the woman in his arms. Rose drifted in and out of consciousness, her body alternating between shivering and burning with fever. He stopped twice to give her more water and once to let his horse rest, and each time he found himself studying her face, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her eyelashes cast shadows in the harsh afternoon light. He told himself it was simply concern for an injured person, nothing more. But Warren Gallagher had always been honest with himself, and he could not quite dismiss the way his heart had started beating faster when she first opened her eyes and looked at him. Laramie appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The town had grown considerably since Warren's last visit 2 years prior, with new buildings lining the main street and the railroad bringing in a steady stream of settlers and supplies. He rode straight to the doctor's office, a neat white building near the center of town, and dismounted carefully, lifting Rose down into his arms. Dr. Samuel Hayes looked up from his desk as Warren shouldered through the door. He was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and steady hands, and he rose immediately when he saw Rose's condition. "Exposure and starvation," Warren said without preamble. "Found her on the trail north of here. She says she was with a wagon train that abandoned her when cholera broke out." The doctor gestured toward the examination room. "Bring her through here. Does she have the cholera?" "I do not think so. She has been alone for 4 days." Dr. Hayes nodded as Warren laid Rose on the examination table. "You did right bringing her here." "Why don't you wait outside while I examine her?" Warren hesitated, surprised by his reluctance to leave her side. But he nodded and stepped out into the waiting room, removing his hat and running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. His stomach growled, reminding him that he had given away his last food, but he ignored it. The examination seemed to take forever. Warren paced the small waiting room, his spurs jingling with each step, until finally the doctor emerged. "She is in bad shape," Dr. Hayes said bluntly. "Severe dehydration, malnutrition, exposure. Her feet are badly blistered and she has a fever, though I agree with you that it does not seem to be cholera. I want to keep her here for at least a few days, maybe a week. She needs food, rest, and medicine." "Whatever she needs," Warren said. "I will cover the costs." The doctor raised his eyebrows. "She is family." "No, just someone who needed help." Dr. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, Mr. Gallagher, you may have saved her life." A few more hours in that sun and we would not be having this conversation. You can see her briefly if you like, but then she needs to rest." Warren entered the examination room quietly. Rose was lying on a proper bed now, covered with clean white sheets, her face freshly washed. Her eyes were closed, but they opened when she heard his footsteps. "You stayed," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "I wanted to make sure you were settled," Warren said. He stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly aware of how dusty and trail-worn he must look. "The doctor says you need to stay here for a while. I have arranged to pay for your care, so do not worry about that." Fresh tears welled in Rose's eyes. "I do not understand. Why would you do this for a stranger?" Warren was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally, "and because no one deserves to die alone on the prairie." "I will find a way to repay you," Rose said, "somehow. I am not asking for repayment. I am just glad I found you when I did." Warren turned his hat in his hands. "I have business to attend to, but I will check on you tomorrow before I leave town. Is there anyone I should wire? Family who might be worried?" Rose's face clouded. "No, there is no one. My parents died of influenza 3 years ago. I was traveling to California to live with my aunt, but I suppose she will think I am dead now." "I can send a telegram if you give me her information," Warren offered. "I would be grateful for that." Rose gave him an address in Sacramento, and Warren committed it to memory. "Mr. Gallagher, I still do not understand why you are being so kind to me, but thank you, truly." Warren nodded, not trusting himself to speak. There was something in the way she looked at him, with those gray eyes that had seen too much suffering, that made his chest tighten with emotions he was not ready to examine. He left quickly, stepping out into the evening air, and stood on the boardwalk for a moment, collecting himself. He delivered his dispatches to the marshal's office, then found a room at the hotel and ordered a substantial meal at the restaurant downstairs, his first real food in 2 days. But even as he ate, his thoughts kept returning to Rose Anderson, lying alone in the doctor's office, and he found himself already planning to visit her first thing in the morning. Warren rose with the sun, as was his habit, and after a quick breakfast he walked to the doctor's office. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of late summer day that reminded him why he loved this country despite its harshness. Dr. Hayes was already up, preparing a tray of food. "She had a rough night," the doctor said when Warren inquired. "Fever spiked around midnight. But it broke just before dawn, and she is resting more comfortably now. You can sit with her if you like. She was asking for you earlier." Warren felt that curious flutter in his chest again. He entered Rose's room quietly and found her awake, looking slightly better than the previous day. There was more color in her cheeks and her eyes were clearer, more focused. "Good morning," he said. "I hear you had a difficult night." "The doctor says I will recover," Rose said. "Thanks to you." She paused, then added, "He also told me you paid for a week of care." "That must have cost you dearly," Warren shrugged. "I had some money saved. I am supposed to be escorting a cattle drive next month, so I will make it back." "You are a cattleman. Among other things, I do whatever work needs doing. Drive cattle, break horses, carry dispatches, sometimes hire out as a guard. I have been doing it since I was 16. Rose studied him with open curiosity. "You do not look like the drifters who pass through. There is something different about you." Warren felt heat rise in his face and he looked away. "I just try to do honest work and not cause trouble." "No, it is more than that." Rose's voice was thoughtful. "You have kind eyes. I noticed that when I first saw you yesterday, even through the fever. Kind eyes and a good heart. Those are rare qualities out here." Warren did not know how to respond to that, so he changed the subject. "I sent that telegram to your aunt this morning. Told her you had been taken ill but were recovering in Laramie and would write to her soon with more details. Thank you. She will be so worried. Rose shifted slightly in the bed, wincing. The doctor says I should be able to travel in a week or two once I have regained my strength. I suppose I will need to find work here until I can afford passage to California. What kind of work did you do before? I was a schoolteacher in Missouri, but I also know how to sew and cook and keep accounts. I will find something. Warren nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. My sister runs a boarding house here in Laramie. She is always looking for reliable help. I could introduce you to her if you are interested. Rose's face lit up. Would you? That would be wonderful. Consider it done. Warren smiled at her and she smiled back, and for a moment the dingy little room seemed brighter. I should let you rest now. I will come by again this evening. I would like that, Rose said softly. Warren visited Rose 3 times a day for the next week, bringing her books from the town's small lending library and fresh fruit from the market. They talked about everything and nothing, swapping stories about their lives. Warren learned that Rose had loved teaching, that she could recite poetry from memory, that she had a quick laugh and a sharp mind. Rose learned that Warren had left home at 16 after his father died, that he loved the open country but sometimes felt lonely, that he had once wanted to buy his own ranch but had never found the right piece of land. Each visit stretched longer than the last. Warren found himself looking forward to seeing Rose with an intensity that surprised him. He liked the way her face brightened when he entered the room, the way she listened intently when he spoke, the way she challenged his opinions without being contentious. He liked her intelligence and her spirit, the strength that had kept her alive when others might have given up. On the 8th day, Dr. Hayes declared Rose well enough to leave his care. Warren brought his sister Margaret to meet her, and the 2 women took to each other immediately. Margaret Gallagher was a widow of 45 who had turned her large house into a thriving boarding establishment, and she offered Rose a position as her assistant without hesitation. You will have your own room and meals included, Margaret said briskly, plus a small salary. The work is not glamorous, but it is steady, and my boarders are mostly railroad men and merchants, respectable types. We keep a clean establishment, and I do not tolerate any nonsense. It sounds perfect, Rose said gratefully. Thank you so much, Mrs. Gallagher. Thank Warren. He is the one who vouched for you. Margaret gave her brother a knowing look that made Warren shift uncomfortably. Though I must say, it is unlike my brother to take such an interest in a stranger's welfare. He usually keeps to himself. Rose glanced at Warren, and he saw something in her expression that made his pulse quicken. Perhaps I am not such a stranger anymore, she said quietly. Warren helped Rose move into the boarding house that afternoon, carrying her few borrowed belongings up to a small but pleasant room on the 2nd floor. The window looked out over Laramie's Main Street, and afternoon sunlight streamed through the clean glass. This is lovely, Rose said, running her hand over the quilted bedspread. I cannot believe how much my circumstances have changed in just over a week. I went from dying in the desert to having a home and a job, all because one kind man stopped to help me. Anyone would have done the same, Warren said, though they both knew that was not true. Rose crossed the small room to stand in front of him. They were closer than propriety strictly allowed, close enough that Warren could see the flecks of blue in her gray eyes. No, she said firmly. Not anyone. You chose to help me, Warren Gallagher. You gave me your last food when you were hungry yourself. You paid for my care when you did not know me at all. You have been visiting me every day, bringing me books and fruit and your company. Those are not the actions of someone who was simply doing his duty. Warren's throat felt tight. Maybe I had my reasons. What reasons? He could have deflected, could have made a joke or changed the subject. But standing there in the golden afternoon light, with Rose looking up at him with those storm-gray eyes, Warren found he could not dissemble. "Because from the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me, I felt something I had never felt before. Because every time I leave your side, I count the hours until I can see you again. Because I look at you and I see someone brave and strong and beautiful, and I cannot imagine going back to the way things were before I found you on that trail." Rose's breath caught. "Warren." "I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you barely know me and you need time to recover and find your footing. I am not asking for anything from you, Rose. I just needed you to know. What if I wanted to give you something anyway?" Rose reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. "What if I told you that I look forward to your visits more than anything else in my day? That when I was lying in the desert waiting to die, I dreamed of someone like you, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I had made." Warren covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "Then I would say I am the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." Rose laughed, the sound bright and clear, and suddenly Warren was laughing too. The tension between them eased into something warmer, more comfortable. He did not kiss her, not yet. It truly was too soon for that. But he held her hand as they stood by the window, and he felt a sense of rightness settle over him like a benediction. The cattle drive Warren had committed to was scheduled to begin in 3 weeks, and he spent that time in Laramie, taking odd jobs around town to replenish his funds. He worked at the livery stable, helped the blacksmith, and assisted with building a new storehouse for the railroad. But every evening found him at Margaret's boarding house, sitting in the parlor with Rose or taking walks with her through the town as her strength returned. They maintained proper decorum, always with Margaret or another boarder as chaperone, but the connection between them deepened with each passing day. Warren learned that Rose had a stubborn streak a mile wide, that she sang when she thought no one was listening, that she was afraid of thunderstorms but loved rain. Rose learned that Warren had a dry sense of humor, that he was skilled at chess, that he had a weakness for apple pie, and harbored a secret ambition to write a book about his experiences on the frontier. Margaret watched their courtship with approval. "I have not seen my brother this happy in years," she told Rose one morning as they prepared breakfast for the boarders. "You are good for him." Rose felt her cheeks warm. "He is good for me too. I keep thinking about how close I came to dying out there and how he saved my life in more ways than one." "Warren always had a protective streak," Margaret said. "Even when we were children, he was always looking out for others. But this is different. He looks at you like you hung the moon, Rose." "I look at him the same way," Rose admitted. "Is it foolish to fall in love so quickly?" "Love does not follow a schedule," Margaret said wisely. "When it is right, whether it takes a day or a decade. And watching you two together, I would say it is very right indeed." The night before Warren was due to leave for the cattle drive, he and Rose took a walk to the edge of town. The September evening was cool and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders occasionally brushing, before Warren finally spoke. "I will be gone for at least 6 weeks, he said. "We are driving a herd from a ranch south of here all the way to the railhead in Nebraska. It is good money, enough that I could think about making some plans for the future." "What kind of plans?" Rose asked. Warren stopped walking and turned to face her. "The kind that involves settling down somewhere. Maybe buying a small spread, nothing fancy, just enough land for some cattle and horses, building a house, making a real home instead of drifting from job to job." He paused, gathering his courage. The kind of plans that work better with two people instead of one. Rose's eyes widened. Warren, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I love you, Rose Anderson. I know it has only been a few weeks, and I know I should probably wait longer before speaking up, but I am not good at hiding what I feel. I love you, and I want to build a life with you if you will have me. Rose's face was radiant in the twilight. I love you too. I think I started loving you when I woke up to find you holding me and giving me water when I was more dead than alive. And yes, Warren Gallagher, I will have you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. Warren pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist as she circled his neck with her arms. They kissed for the first time there on the edge of town, with the prairie stretching out endlessly before them and the first stars appearing overhead. It was a gentle kiss, sweet and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, Warren rested his forehead against hers. When I come back from this drive, I want to marry you, he said, if you are willing to wait that long. I will wait, Rose promised. 6 weeks is nothing compared to a lifetime together. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, making quiet plans for their future. Warren would save every penny he made on the cattle drive and add it to what he already had. When he returned, they would start looking for land, somewhere close to Laramie so Rose could maintain her friendship with Margaret. They would marry in the spring, giving them time to build a house and prepare for their new life together. Warren left before dawn the next morning, but not before stopping at the boarding house to say goodbye. Rose met him at the door, still in her dressing gown with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. They held each other for a long moment without speaking. "Stay safe," Rose whispered. "Come back to me." "Nothing could keep me away," Warren promised. He kissed her once more, briefly, then mounted his horse and rode south without looking back, because he knew if he did, he might not have the strength to leave at all. The 6 weeks stretched out interminably for both of them. Warren worked from before dawn until after dark, helping move 2,000 head of cattle across rivers and through canyons, dealing with ornery steers and occasional brushes with rustlers. But every night, sitting by the campfire with the other drovers, his thoughts turned to Rose. He wondered what she was doing, whether she was thinking of him, how he would feel when he finally saw her again. Rose threw herself into her work at the boarding house, learning to manage the accounts and handle the more difficult guests with Margaret's guidance. But her mind was always partly elsewhere, counting down the days until Warren's return. She wrote him several letters, though she had no way to send them until he came back. In them, she poured out her heart, describing her days and her dreams for their future, all the small details she wanted to share with him. Warren returned to Laramie on a cold afternoon in late October, tired and dusty, but with a fat roll of money in his saddlebags. He rode straight to the boarding house and dismounted in a fluid motion, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. He knocked once, and the door flew open to reveal Rose, who must have been watching from the window. She launched herself into his arms with a cry of joy, and Warren caught her easily, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss this time, but something urgent and passionate. 6 weeks of longing and loneliness pouring into that single moment of reunion. "I missed you," Rose gasped when they finally broke apart. "Every single day I missed you." "I missed you too," Warren said, setting her down but not releasing her. "It felt like the longest 6 weeks of my life." Margaret appeared in the doorway, smiling broadly. "Well, do not just stand there on the porch, Warren. Come inside and get cleaned up. We will have a proper welcome-home dinner tonight." Over dinner, Warren told them about the cattle drive while Rose held his hand under the table. Some of the boarders joined them, men Warren had known for years, and they all seemed pleased to see him so obviously happy. After the meal, Warren and Rose retreated to the parlor, where they finally had a chance to talk properly. "I made good money on the drive," Warren said. "Enough that we can start looking for land right away. I was thinking maybe somewhere north of town, toward the mountains. There is good grazing up there and water." "That sounds perfect," Rose said. "Warren, I have been thinking about something. I know we said we would wait until spring to marry, but I do not want to wait any more. We have already spent too much time apart." Warren felt his heart leap. "Are you saying you want to move the wedding up?" "I am saying I want to marry you as soon as we can arrange it. Next week, even." "Why wait when we both know what we want?" Warren pulled her close, feeling like he might burst with happiness. "Next week it is, then. We will go to the church tomorrow and make the arrangements." They were married 6 days later in Laramie's small Methodist church, with Margaret and the local marshal standing as witnesses. Rose wore a simple but beautiful dress that Margaret had helped her make, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Warren wore his best suit, freshly brushed and pressed, and he stood at the altar with his heart pounding as he watched Rose walk toward him. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Warren kissed his bride, he felt like every hard mile he had traveled, every lonely night, every difficult choice had been leading him to this moment. Rose was his now, and he was hers, and everything else would fall into place around that central truth. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, in a room that overlooked the railroad tracks. It was not fancy, but neither of them cared. They were together, finally and completely, and that was all that mattered. Warren was gentle with Rose, mindful that this was her first time, and she responded with a passion and trust that took his breath away. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, whispering words of devotion in the darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Rose's head on Warren's chest as he stroked her hair. "I never knew I could be this happy," Rose said softly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real." "It is real," Warren assured her. "We are real. And this is just the beginning, Rose. We have our whole lives ahead of us." They spent the next several weeks living at the boarding house while they searched for land. Warren wanted to find the perfect spot, and Rose was content to wait until they did. They rode out together every few days, exploring the country north and east of Laramie, looking for the right combination of water, grass, and shelter. They found it in mid-November, a beautiful piece of land tucked into a valley where a creek ran year-round. There were cottonwood trees along the water and good grazing on the slopes, and the view stretched for miles in every direction. Warren put down half the purchase price immediately and arranged to pay off the rest over the next 2 years. "This is it," Rose said, standing on the land that would be their home. "This is where we will build our life." They broke ground on the house the following week. Warren did most of the construction himself, with occasional help from friends and neighbors. It was hard work, but he loved every minute of it, knowing he was building something permanent, something that would last. Rose helped where she could, and when Warren would not let her do the heavier labor, she focused on planning the interior, deciding where each room would be and what furniture they would need. The house was finished by early February, a sturdy structure of logs and stone with a wide front porch and 4 rooms. It was not large, but it was well built and comfortable, with a big fireplace for warmth and windows that let in plenty of light. They moved in on a cold but clear day, carrying their few possessions across the threshold together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Gallagher," Warren said, sweeping Rose into his arms and spinning her around in the middle of their new parlor. Rose laughed, the sound echoing off the bare walls. "Welcome home, Mr. Gallagher. I love it. I love everything about it." They spent the rest of the winter settling in, turning the house into a home. Rose sewed curtains and quilts while Warren built furniture and repaired fences. They acquired a small herd of cattle and several horses, the beginning of their ranch. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and read aloud to each other or simply talked, sharing their thoughts and dreams. Spring brought new life to the valley, and with it, the news that Rose was pregnant. She told Warren on a morning in April, when the wildflowers were blooming and the air was sweet with the scent of new grass. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her carefully, before setting her down and dropping to his knees to press his face against her still flat belly. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Rose, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Warren said, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. "I am overwhelmed. I am grateful. I am terrified. But mostly, I am just so incredibly, impossibly happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rose continued to help around the ranch until Warren insisted she rest more, worrying about her pushing herself too hard. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, secretly pleased by his attentiveness. They spent long summer evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over their land, talking about names and making plans for the baby's arrival. Their son was born on a warm night in December, arriving quickly and healthily with Margaret there to assist. Warren held his wife's hand through the whole ordeal, awed by her strength and courage. When the baby finally came, wailing lustily, Warren cut the cord with shaking hands and watched as Margaret cleaned the infant and placed him in Rose's arms. "He is perfect," Rose breathed, studying the tiny face. "Warren, look at him. He has your nose." Warren touched one finger to the baby's impossibly small hand, feeling the tiny fingers close around his. "Hello, son," he said softly. "Welcome to the world." They named him Thomas William Gallagher after both their fathers and called him Tommy. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's gray eyes and his father's dark hair. Warren adjusted to fatherhood with surprising ease, learning to change diapers and walk the floor with a crying infant at 3 in the morning. He loved watching Rose nurse their son, the peaceful expression on her face as Tommy fed, the tender way she held him. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Warren proved to have a good eye for cattle and horses, and word spread about the quality of his stock. They were able to hire a hand to help with the work, a young man named Peter who lived in a small cabin on the far edge of their property. Rose started a vegetable garden that became the envy of their neighbors, and she traded produce and preserves for other goods they needed. Tommy grew into a bright, active toddler who followed his father everywhere, chattering constantly in his developing vocabulary. Warren taught him to ride almost before he could walk properly, setting him on a gentle mare and leading her around the yard while Tommy shrieked with laughter. When Tommy was 3 years old, Rose told Warren she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness in the early months and exhaustion that sometimes overwhelmed her. Warren worried constantly, but Rose remained optimistic, resting when she needed to and trusting that everything would be all right. Their daughter was born in the spring, smaller than Tommy had been, but just as healthy. She had Rose's delicate features and blonde hair that surprised them both. They named her Sarah Margaret, after Warren's mother and sister, and called her Sally. Tommy was initially suspicious of this interloper who took so much of his mother's attention, but he quickly became protective of his little sister, insisting on helping with her care. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and small milestones. Tommy started school in Laramie, riding into town with Warren 3 days a week. Sally learned to walk and talk, proving to be as strong-willed as her mother. The ranch continued to grow, and Warren began breeding horses in addition to cattle, developing a reputation for training difficult animals. Rose found joy in every day, even the hard ones. She loved her children, her husband, and the life they had built together. Sometimes, when she was hanging laundry or working in her garden, she would stop and look around at everything they had created, and she would remember that day on the trail when she had been certain she was going to die. She would think about Warren sharing his last biscuit with her, that first act of kindness that had changed everything, and she would feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Warren felt the same way. He had lived half his life as a drifter, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home, never letting himself get too attached to people or places. Then he had found Rose, or maybe she had found him, and suddenly everything had shifted. He had discovered that he could be happy staying in one place, that roots could be a gift rather than a burden, that love was worth any sacrifice. One evening in late summer, when Tommy was 7 and Sally was 4, Warren and Rose sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and a cool breeze brought the scent of sage and wildflowers. "You ever regret it?" Rose asked suddenly. "Settling down here instead of continuing to roam?" Warren looked at her in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment." "Why would you ask that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy. You gave up so much of your old life for me." Warren took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I did not give up anything that mattered. That life was lonely, Rose. I was always moving, always looking for the next job, the next place, and I never realized how empty it all was until I met you. You gave me something worth staying for. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. If anything, I am the one who should be asking if you have regrets." "None," Rose said firmly. "Except maybe that I did not meet you sooner, though I suppose everything happened exactly when it was supposed to happen. I had to be on that trail at that exact moment for you to find me. We had to meet exactly the way we did." "Fate," Warren said thoughtfully. "Love," Rose corrected. "Fate brought us together, but love is what kept us that way." Warren kissed her gently, tasting the lemonade she had been drinking. "I love you more now than I did the day we married." "Is that possible?" "It must be, because I feel the same way. Every year with you is better than the last." Tommy ran up to the porch then, flushed and excited. "Papa, can we go fishing tomorrow? You promised you would teach me to catch the big ones." "We will go first thing in the morning," Warren promised. "Right after chores." "Can I come too?" Sally piped up from where she was arranging stones in patterns in the dirt. "You are too little," Tommy said scornfully. "I am not," Sally protested, her lower lip trembling. "She can come if she wants," Warren said firmly. "We are all going to go together as a family. Does that sound good?" Both children cheered and Rose smiled at her husband. This was what they had built, she thought. Not just the house and the ranch, but these moments, this sense of belonging and togetherness. A family bound by love and strengthened by shared experiences. The fishing trip the next day was a success, with Tommy catching 3 good-sized trout and Sally managing to land a small one all by herself. They cooked the fish over a campfire for lunch, and Warren taught the children how to identify different plants and animal tracks. Rose sat on a sun-warmed rock and watched her family, her heart full to bursting. As the children grew older, Warren and Rose faced the normal challenges that came with raising a family. Tommy went through a rebellious phase at 12, testing boundaries and sometimes talking back. Sally proved to be fearless, climbing trees and riding horses in a way that gave Rose heart palpitations. There were illnesses and accidents, arguments and reconciliations, laughter, and tears. But through it all, Warren and Rose stood together, united in their love for each other and their children. When Tommy was 15, he announced that he wanted to be a veterinarian, fascinated by animal medicine after watching the local vet tend to sick cattle. Warren was proud, even though it meant Tommy would need to go away for schooling eventually. Rose fretted about him leaving but recognized that he needed to follow his own path. Sally, at 12, was already showing talent as an artist, filling notebooks with sketches of horses and landscapes. Rose encouraged her daughter's creativity, ordering art supplies from catalogs and displaying Sally's best work in the house. The ranch continued to thrive. Warren's reputation as a horseman had spread throughout Wyoming territory and beyond, and people came from hundreds of miles away to buy his trained mounts. They hired additional hands as needed, building a bunkhouse for them and treating them fairly. Peter, their first employee, became almost like family, eventually marrying a girl from town and building a house of his own on the property. Warren and Rose celebrated their 20th anniversary on a mild evening in November. The children were spending the night with Margaret in town, giving them a rare evening alone. Warren prepared Rose's favorite meal while she watched from a chair by the fire, and they ate by candlelight at the table he had built with his own hands 2 decades earlier. 20 years, Rose mused. Where did the time go? Into this, Warren said, gesturing around at the home they had created. Into Tommy and Sally. Into every morning we woke up together and every night we went to sleep in each other's arms. The time did not disappear, Rose. It just transformed into something better. You have gotten philosophical in your old age, Rose teased. Warren was 52 now, his hair streaked with gray, but he was still strong and vital, capable of a full day's work on the ranch. And you have gotten even more beautiful, Warren countered. Rose was 43, with fine lines around her eyes and a few silver threads in her brown hair. But to Warren she was exactly as lovely as the day he had found her on the trail. After dinner, they danced in the parlor to no music but the crackling of the fire and the wind outside. Warren held Rose close, swaying gently, remembering the first time he had held her in his arms when he lifted her onto his horse so long ago. I would do it all again, he said suddenly. Every moment, every choice, every hardship, because it all led me here to you, to this life we have built. So would I, Rose agreed. Even the painful parts, even dying of thirst in the desert, because you found me there, and everything after that has been a gift. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as their own, taking pleasure in giving pleasure. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Warren thought about how lucky he was. He had spent his youth searching for something without knowing what it was, and then he had found it in the form of a starving woman by the side of a trail. Rose had changed everything, had given him purpose and meaning and love beyond measure. Tommy left for university when he was 18, heading to a veterinary school in Colorado. It was hard saying goodbye, but Warren and Rose were proud of their son's ambition and determination. He came home for holidays and summers, and eventually he would return permanently to practice in Wyoming. But for now, he needed to spread his wings and find his own way. Sally stayed closer to home, studying art with a painter in Cheyenne while still living on the ranch. She was courted by several young men from neighboring ranches, but she was in no hurry to marry, preferring to focus on her work. Warren respected that, remembering how he had spent years drifting before he was ready to settle down. As Warren entered his late 50s, he began to slow down slightly, letting the hired hands take on more of the physical work while he focused on the business side of the ranch. Rose had taken over most of the bookkeeping years earlier, proving to have a sharp mind for numbers and trade. Together, they had built something substantial, a working ranch that provided a good living and a legacy for their children. They added a room onto the house, anticipating future grandchildren, and planted an orchard that would take years to fully mature. They were thinking in terms of generations now, building not just for themselves but for the family that would come after them. Tommy married at 24, bringing home a kind-hearted girl named Elizabeth who had worked as a nurse at the veterinary school. They settled in a town 50 miles north, where Tommy opened his own practice. Sally married at 26, choosing a quiet ranch hand named James who worshipped her and supported her artistic ambitions. They built a house on the far edge of Warren and Rose's property, close enough to help with the ranch but far enough for their own privacy. The grandchildren began arriving, first Tommy's daughter Grace, then Sally's twin boys Robert and Henry, then Tommy's son Charles. Warren and Rose embraced their roles as grandparents with joy, spoiling the children shamelessly and filling the house with the sound of young laughter once again. Warren taught his grandsons to ride and fish, the same way he had taught Tommy. Rose read stories to Grace and let the little girl help in the garden. They attended christenings and birthdays, holidays and ordinary Sunday dinners, weaving themselves into the fabric of their growing family. One summer evening, when Warren was 65 and Rose was 56, they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard that had once held their own children. The house had been expanded twice more over the years, and the ranch now stretched across several thousand acres. They employed 6 hands full-time, and the Gallagher name was known throughout Wyoming and neighboring territories. "We did well," Rose said, reaching for Warren's hand. "Look at everything we built." Warren squeezed her fingers gently. "We did better than well. We built something that will last long after we are gone." "Do you ever think about that day on the trail?" Rose asked. "When you found me?" "All the time," Warren admitted. "I think about how easily I could have missed you. If my horse had not stopped, if I had been traveling a different route, if I had been even an hour earlier or later. So many things had to align perfectly for us to find each other." "I think about it too," Rose said. "I think about how close I came to giving up. I had stopped fighting by the time you found me. I had accepted that I was going to die there. And then you appeared like an angel, and you gave me your last biscuit even though you were hungry yourself. That is when I knew you were someone special. That is when I started to believe I might have a future after all." "That biscuit," Warren said with a soft laugh. "I have thought about that biscuit so many times over the years. It was just a plain biscuit, nothing special, but it changed both our lives." "It was not the biscuit," Rose corrected gently. "It was the choice you made to share it. That showed me who you were, Warren, kind and generous and good. Everything that came after that flowed from that one moment of compassion." Warren was quiet for a moment, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. "I was lonely before I met you," he said finally. "I did not realize how lonely until I had something to compare it to. I thought I was free, traveling from place to place, answering to no one. But I was really just lost. You gave me a home, Rose. Not this place, though I love it. You were my home from the moment I looked into your eyes." Rose felt tears sting her eyes, even after all these years, moved by her husband's words. "And you saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me life when I was dying, hope when I had none, and love beyond anything I had ever imagined. Every good thing in my life came from that day when you stopped to help a stranger on a dusty trail." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned gold and pink, then deep purple. The grandchildren were called inside by their parents, and the ranch settled into evening quiet. Somewhere in the distance, A coyote called, and one of the horses whinnied in response. "No regrets," Warren said, making it both a question and a statement. "Not a single one," Rose confirmed. "If I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a thing. Except maybe I would have kissed you sooner." Warren laughed and pulled her close, kissing her there on the porch where they had shared so many moments over the years. Her lips were as sweet as they had been on that first evening when he had told her he loved her, before the cattle drive that had seemed to last forever. As the stars began to appear, one by one, they went inside to their home, the house that Warren had built with his own hands, that Rose had turned into a sanctuary. They moved through the familiar rooms, checking that everything was secure for the night, a routine they had performed thousands of times before. In their bedroom, they prepared for sleep with the ease of long practice. Rose brushed out her hair, now more silver than brown, while Warren extinguished the lamps. They climbed into the bed they had shared for more than 30 years, and Warren gathered Rose into his arms the way he did every night. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too," Rose replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. "My cowboy, my rescuer, my everything." They drifted off to sleep together, wrapped in each other's arms and surrounded by the life they had built. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The ranch slept, secure and prosperous, a testament to the power of love and hard work and two people who had found each other against all odds. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and constants in equal measure. Warren and Rose grew older together, their bodies slowing but their love as strong as ever. They celebrated their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and later their 50th, a rare achievement that made them something of a legend in the county. Tommy took over more of the ranch operations as Warren's strength waned, and Sally's art began to gain recognition beyond Wyoming, with her paintings hanging in galleries in Denver and San Francisco. The grandchildren grew up and several married, bringing great-grandchildren into the world. The family expanded and flourished, all of it traceable back to that day on the trail when a cowboy shared his last biscuit with a dying woman. Warren was 78 when his health began to fail seriously. His heart, the doctors said, was simply wearing out after a long and active life. He faced the news with equanimity, grateful for the years he had been given. Rose never left his side, sitting by his bed in the room where they had slept together for more than half a century, holding his hand and reminiscing about their life together. "I am not afraid," Warren told her one afternoon. "I have lived a full life, Rose. I have known love and family and purpose. I have no complaints." "I am afraid," Rose admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I am afraid of being without you." "You will never be without me," Warren said, his voice weak but certain. "I will be in every room of this house, in every acre of this land. I will be in our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I will be waiting for you whenever your time comes so we can be together again." Warren Gallagher died peacefully on a warm June morning, with Rose holding one hand and Tommy holding the other, surrounded by his family. His last words were to Rose, a whispered, "I love you," that she would carry in her heart for the rest of her days. Rose grieved deeply, as anyone would after losing their life partner, but she did not let the grief consume her. She had too much to live for, too many people who needed her. She remained on the ranch, helping Tommy and Elizabeth manage the operations, playing with her great-grandchildren, and tending her garden. She told stories about Warren to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and vibrant. She lived another 8 years after Warren's death, years filled with love and family, and the satisfaction of seeing the legacy they had built together continuing to thrive. She was there when Tommy's grandson was born, the first child of the sixth generation descended from Warren and Rose's love. She was there when Sally had a major exhibition of her work in New York City, traveling east despite her age to support her daughter's triumph. Rose Anderson Gallagher died in her sleep on a crisp October night, 3 months past her 85th birthday. She was found by one of her great-granddaughters, lying peacefully in the bed she had shared with Warren, a faint smile on her face as if she had been dreaming of something wonderful. The funeral brought together more than 200 people, all of them connected to Rose and Warren either by blood or by the countless lives they had touched over the decades. Tommy, now 70 himself, stood at the graveside next to his father's headstone and spoke about his parents' love story, about the day a cowboy found a dying woman on a trail and chose to share his last biscuit with her. "That single act of kindness," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion, "changed everything. It saved my mother's life, and it gave my father the love he had been searching for without knowing it. From that one moment of compassion came all of this." He gestured to the assembled crowd, to the ranch spread out around them, to the family that spanned 6 generations. "Every one of us is here because a good man chose to help a stranger. We are all living proof that love and kindness matter, that one person's choice can ripple out to touch hundreds of lives." As Rose was laid to rest beside Warren, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the cemetery in golden light. It seemed fitting, a benediction from the heavens, a sign that Rose and Warren were together again at last. The ranch continued under Tommy's stewardship and would pass to his children in time, then to their children after that. The house that Warren built was maintained lovingly, expanded when necessary but never fundamentally altered. Future generations would walk the same floors, look out the same windows, and feel the presence of the love that had built this place. Sally's paintings hung in museums and private collections, but the ones she considered her best work stayed in the family, passed down from generation to generation. Her favorite, which hung over the fireplace in the old ranch house, was a portrait of her parents standing on the porch at sunset, Warren's arm around Rose's waist, both of them gazing out at their land with expressions of contentment and love. The story of how Warren and Rose met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It was a reminder of where they came from, of the values that their family was built upon: compassion, generosity, hard work, and enduring love. Children grew up hearing about the cowboy who shared his last biscuit with a starving woman, and how that small act of kindness had blossomed into something so much larger than either of them could have imagined. The land itself seemed to remember them. The cottonwood trees along the creek grew tall and strong, providing shade for future generations. The house stood solid against Wyoming winds and winter storms, a testament to the quality of Warren's craftsmanship. Rose's garden continued to bloom each spring, tended by descendants who had inherited her love of growing things. On summer evenings, when the light slanted golden across the valley, and the air was sweet with the smell of sage, you could almost see them there on the porch, Warren and Rose, hand in hand, watching the sunset together. The ranch hands would swear they sometimes heard laughter carried on the wind, or saw 2 figures walking together toward the creek at twilight. Whether these were ghosts, or simply the memories so deeply embedded in the land itself, no one could say for certain. But everyone who lived on or visited the ranch agreed that it had a special feeling, a sense of peace and rightness that came from being built on a foundation of true love. The legacy of Warren and Rose Gallagher lived on in countless ways, large and small. in the way their descendants treated strangers with kindness, remembering that you never knew when a small act of compassion might change a life. In the strength of family bonds that had been forged by two people who loved each other completely. In the values of hard work, honesty, and generosity that were passed down through the generations. But perhaps most importantly, their legacy lived on in the simple truth that love, real and lasting love, was worth fighting for. That it could sustain you through hardship and loss. That it could build something permanent in a transient world, and that it could transform two lonely people into the foundation of something that would endure long after they were gone. Warren had been a drifter searching for meaning when he found Rose dying by the side of a trail in the summer of 1878. Rose had been an orphan teacher heading to an uncertain future when Warren gave her his last biscuit and with it, a reason to keep living. Together, they had built a life that mattered, a love that endured, and a family that would carry their story forward into the future. It was a simple story in many ways, the story of two people who found each other when they needed each other most. But it was also an epic tale of love conquering adversity, of small kindnesses having profound consequences, of two souls recognizing each other across the distance and finding home in each other's arms. The ranch prospered into the 20th century and beyond, adapting to changing times while maintaining its essential character. The Gallagher family grew and spread, but they always kept the old ranch as their center, their touchstone, the place where it all began. And on warm summer evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren gathered on that wide front porch, someone would inevitably tell the story again. The story of how it all started, with a cowboy and a dying woman and a biscuit that changed everything. The listeners would lean forward, even those who had heard it 100 times before, captivated by the tale of love and rescue and the building of something that would last forever. Because that was the real magic of Warren and Rose's story, the reason it endured and inspired. It reminded everyone who heard it that love was real, that heroes could be found in ordinary people, that kindness mattered, and that from the smallest acts of compassion, the greatest legacies could grow. It was a story that gave hope, and showed that even in the harsh wilderness of the Old West, beauty and tenderness and lasting love could not only survive but thrive. Warren and Rose's love story had begun with hunger and desperation on a dusty trail in Wyoming territory, but it had grown into something magnificent, something that would echo through time for as long as the Gallagher family remembered where they came from, and the two people whose love had started it all. The end came peacefully for both of them, as it should for people who had lived well and loved deeply. But in another sense, there was no ending, because love like theirs did not die. It transformed, it spread, it became part of the fabric of the world itself. Every happy marriage in their family tree, every act of kindness done by their descendants, every time someone chose compassion over indifference, Warren and Rose's love continued, as vital and alive as it had been on that day when a cowboy shared his last biscuit with a starving woman and changed both their lives forever.